guys, and welcome back. Today I'm working on this little painting, and I wanted to get the background to feel like it has a mood and an atmosphere, but to mostly group together and feel really harmonious. And I'm going to talk a bit about that and how I kind of achieved that look, since it's really different from how I usually end up doing my backgrounds like this. But I do have a really exciting announcement first off, and that is I will be tabling in the Artist Alley at Emerald City Comic Con, which is March 14th through the 17th. So that is less than 2 weeks away, actually. And I will be at table W12 if you'd like to swing by and say hi. I love being able to meet you guys at cons, so that would be really exciting for me. But anyways, we can go ahead and jump right in with this one. Okay, so going into this painting, I kind of had a feeling for how I wanted to execute the character against the background. I wanted her to really just stand out and be the focal point, and I wanted the background to have this feeling like there's a lot more going on, but I wanted it also to not be really distracting and chaotic. And that's something that sometimes I struggle with when it comes to environments. I like to get really lost in the local color of different items and these really drastic values. So getting that under control is certainly something that, as I move forward with doing more complicated backgrounds, I really need to get a better understanding of. And I do know, I know in my brain, I don't always execute it as well, but I know that when it comes to value allocation, generally you want your focal point, the thing that you want the eye to linger on, you should have the highest contrast there. And then as you move away from that into areas that should have less attention grabbing aspects, the contrast should be lower. So for this, the contrast for the background needed to be lower, and for the figure, the character, she needed to have darker darks and lighter lights. And going into this, I had an idea that I wanted to create one glaze first and then build up the darks more and more, and then have pops of highlight on top of it. That way it would bring everything together. Everything would have the same color family and have that harmony to it. And this is actually my second take on this painting. I completely messed up the first one because I wasn't going into it with good enough of a plan. And I noticed that this is kind of a problem that I struggle with when I want to do something kind of like this, or something that feels like it should feel really in the moment and fluid and natural, and like I don't have to do a bunch of thinking and planning beforehand. It usually goes wrong for me. I usually don't need that much planning. I just need a little bit of direction beforehand and a little bit more forethought, and then that same kind of an application works so much better. So I think it's just important for me to understand my own limitations and the little things that I can do to change that, while still being able to try and experiment with new elements and new ways of executing things. I would say that if I could do this a third time, which I never would, I would do the background, that first layer, a lot lighter. And then it would allow me to have more variation in the background values. And I know I was just saying you want generally to have relatively low contrast between the values for things like that, but I have it really low, and I could have gotten a lot more lights in there without having to resort to ultimately the white gel pen that I pull forward and the gouache. And that really is something that I would have preferred, and it's something that I'm still struggling with today. I'm definitely, obviously, I just finished this painting, but I know that that's one of the techniques with watercolors that I just get so, I don't know, so ready to put down color and move into values that I oftentimes make that first pass a lot darker than it needs to be. So that was one critique, that I really could have gotten a little bit more out of what I was already putting down, what I was already doing. But again, that's a good reminder going forward, just to make sure that I do that, because for the most part, I think I generally have gotten a lot better at that. And I guess I just have to have these little moments where I fall back a little bit to remind myself that I have to stay vigilant and make sure that I'm staying on top of myself with things like that. Also, another thing that I would have liked to do a little bit more is with that first initial value color wash that I did at the very beginning, I would have liked to push, I think, a little bit more of a gradient. So when I did it, if you noticed, I dropped in a more of a blue into this like magenta color towards the bottom. And that did help a lot, but I think that I would have liked to have just a lot more color variation within the background itself while still creating this harmonizing glaze. But overall, I do actually think that while I certainly couldn't have done a lot better job on that, I do really like the effect, and it is something that I'd like to experiment more with and really try to figure it out better so that I can execute something like this more. I just really did love being able to go in and have everything instantly grouped together for something that I knew I wanted it to group together, and I wanted it to feel like one space that once you're really looking at it, it has more interest and more information. But as far as a full read from farther away, it has a little bit more of a simplified and silhouetted approach to the figure. And that is something that in past more complicated environments I have really struggled with, where I wanted that figure to have impact and I wanted it to be something that you could step away from it and it would look really powerful. So before working on this, I did do a very mini little color comp where I just got the basic color of the background, this like magenta purple, and then the color of her hair, and then the pops of value elsewhere and her skin color basically. And having that as a guide was really helpful. It made sure that it had the color profile that I wanted and it had kind of that mysterious atmosphere, but it also allowed me to get a little bit more nuanced as I was working on it. So as I was working on her skin, I started incorporating more of a cool color into the shadows, one that actually had the base of that same purple color in the background, and that really helped bridge the gap between the figure and the background. And that really is something that I always try to do, even when you want it to have a lot of pop and contrast like this, where I wanted the figure to stand out. I still wanted it to look like she belonged in that environment. But I think in the end it really helped that her hair completely or almost completely frames her skin, and it does completely frame her face from the background. So by having a little bit of that purple coming in through her skin, but then having that completely opposite color, it's not actual opposite, but it is pretty close, but the very different green color that outlines it, that really helps her be distinguished from the background while still feeling harmonious in other areas and in other places. And there's always a few finalizing detail steps that I do at the very end of every painting, whether it's adding metallic paints or white highlights or actually going in and fixing mistakes with gouache. There's always something that I have to come in at the end and finish up. And this one, I went in with the white gel pen to do a few different things. I added, again, those highlights to the background elements to help it pop off of things that became too close in value and in color. And I also used it in the figure, and I really feel like this piece needed it. Like, some of them, it helps and it's nice, but it's pretty minor. And this one, while the execution was pretty minor, I feel like the piece really, really needed those extra little steps, those extra little elements of contrast. And I don't know, I always love that when, not when they need it, but when I can watch a piece be transformed by these really simple steps like that. Also, it was really minor, but I went in with my white gel pen to add this really slight pattern on part of her clothing, and I really liked that. I love adding patterns and being able to add just a little bit more realistic details, I guess you could say, to her and to what she's wearing. I really like that. I think that also added a lot to it, even though it is pretty subtle. And don't forget to come say hi if you're going to be able to be at Emerald City Comic Con. I'll be at table W12. And this painting is available at my shops if you'd like to own the original. There's a link down in the description that'll take you over there. And there's lots of art goodies and prints at my art shop. So again, the link's down in the description. There's also a link to my Patreon, which is a great way to help support this channel and the artwork that I do. And I do post every Wednesdays and Saturdays right here on YouTube. So I will be back with another video.